Welcome to Ciemethia vs. Zalga's Den. Zalga's Den is a public dungeon in Craglorn, and this is to show solo versus group fighting. I'm showing her layout here, which is Crushing Shock. It's the single target damage that can proc Crystal Fragments, which is also single target but much higher damage. Fire Impulse is her AoE. It's a low-cost AoE that does reasonable damage. Structured Entropy is her damage buff, also gives her more health, and does damage over time and healing over time. And Hardened Ward is her major defense. For a little bit of Magicka, she gets an enormous damage shield. This time I'm playing with Meteor 2 as her ultimate. In this video I don't use it, but it's at least there as an offensive ultimate. Charged Atronach on her Resto Bar. Hardened Ward is double barred, because it's such an important part of the defense. The next skill is Annulment, and that's a magic shield from the Mage's Guild. So it's an additional shield she can stack on. Healing Springs for additional health, Healing Ward for another shield. So basically this bar is all about defense except this last power, Endless Fury, gives her an execute in case she needs one. So the idea here is to see solo on group fighting, and the goal is to get the Sky Shard. Each public dungeon has a Sky Shard, usually has a boss too. There's no boss listed on here, though there is one in the dungeon, but that's a little much at VR 11 versus a VR 6 character. So here we see mud crabs, which are aggressive unusually. We start the fight off with Structured Entropy and then just go right into spamming Fire Impulse. It's a nice PB AoE damage source. You can see it's doing between 2.6 and 4k worth of damage to them. And it just burns down the little critters. Now the mud crabs only had 10,000 health, which in this context makes them essentially fragile minions. These crocodiles are a little burlier. They have about 24,000 health. So again, the fighting pattern is kind of the same. Put up the Hardened Ward so that there's some protection, and then spam the heck out of Fire Impulse to do damage to them all. You can see she was getting about 6,000 DPS, which isn't stellar, but it was effective enough. Loot the bodies and move on. The important thing in most dungeons is to be able to deal with a variety of foes. So here we have a 100,000 hit point snake. And since it's a single enemy, we switch over to the single target skills. That's Crushing Shock and Crystal Fragments when it's up. I'm moving around here because VR 11 foes versus VR 6 character, it seems safer just to kite them a little bit at least. Stay out of tail swipes like that. You can see it's reasonably straightforward to take down something that has, let's call it 8 times the hit points that Ciemethia does. A little AFK there, so I paused the video and came back. As you approach each of the mobs, it's good to take a look at how many hit points they have. If you have an add-on that will show that, the default UI doesn't, which I'm not fond of. I understand why they did it for immersion, but I really like having numbers. And you can see the attack pattern, such as it is pretty similar in these fights. It's run around trying to stay out of their way, but within Ring of Fire range, or within Fire Impulse range, and then when the mobs get low, switch to the single target attacks. Same thing here. Kind of a bad lead in there. I didn't start with Hardened Ward, but I recovered, got Structured Entropy up, Hardened Ward. Now I'm doing more damage. Crushing Shocks. Trying to get Crystal Fragments to proc again. Sometimes it takes a while. There it is. Then we throw it. Crushing Shock is nice because it has a interrupt effect, so the snakes can't use their curl up and heal off the damage that you've done to them power. Another snake. And we just repeat repeat our usual attack pattern. By moving, we force them to spend their time moving, and they're not as good as a player about switching between ranged and melee attacks. The snake has a ranged attack, it can spit at you, but if it's decided it wants to do a melee, it will usually spend some time just kind of running after you, not attacking, trying to get to that melee range. Now we're getting close to the Sky Shard, and look, a whole new set of enemies. So we've got two groups here. You can see a group over on the left and then the group I'm targeting on the right. Try to engage the one group, and because it's a group, we switch back to Fire Impulse, running around the edges of them just to kind of stay out of their way as they start their attack. The other group decided to join in, but it's not really a problem. The damage they're doing wasn't enough to get through the Hardened Ward, and they're all down. Loot them. Head to the Sky Shard that's our prize. Absorb it, and we're good to go.